Borders is a podcast by the Euronet Plus network about life on the European Union's external borders.
Hi there, I'm Gigi Donelli, journalist at Radio 24 Sole 24 Ore, a radio station that is part of the Euronet Plus network. In this episode of our podcast on borders, I'm looking at a border that is not yet in contact with the European Union, but which is perhaps currently perceived as more European than ever. I'm going to tell you about life in the city of Kharkiv. Kharkiv is Ukraine's second largest city and the main urban center in eastern Ukraine. It lies less than 40 kilometers from the Russian border. It is a city daily threatened and scared by 1,000 days of war. Not so long ago, Kharkiv boasted 2 million inhabitants, a thriving theatre scene, upmarket restaurants, trendy cafes, 4 historic university. But the Russian invasion turned everything upside down. There was a time when rich Russians came here from Belgorod and Kursk to party or spend the night. Today, only around half of Kharkiv's former residents remain, and their daily life is a dangerous gamble. Actually, you are dicing with death almost all times, whether you are arriving in the city by train, walking down the street, sitting in a class at school, or even sleeping in your own bed at night. 30 kilometers to the north, Russian troops. In March 2022, they reached the suburbs of the city, but they were pushed back to the international border, which is half an hour drive away and stretches from west to east for hundreds of kilometers. After the liberation in September that year and the brief phase of relative truce, the Russians returned. They mounted a ground invasion in the spring of 2024. Vovchansk and Lipsy were reduced to nothing more than a pile of rubble, and the bombing was widespread, hitting both remote villages and the capital itself. Meanwhile, in the east, the invaders have been advancing slowly and steadily from the Oskil River front. Almost every day since last spring, Kharkiv has been hit by glide bombs and missiles. The missiles are worst, but the Cap 500 glide bombs is still devastating. They arrive mainly at night and can be heard from every corner of the city. They can destroy everything within a 100-meter radius. Apartment blocks, cars and supermarkets turn into factories of flames, rubbles and pain. The invader strategy has always been clear: to empty the city and crush the defense of those who resisted. In October alone, 380 residential buildings were damaged in the city. Staying in Kharkiv today means resisting, and the Kharkivians who remain exhibit a mix of pride and fatalism. Fatalism and adaptation, and so it's not surprising that the underground network can change and become school.
Dmitry is almost 6 years old. He enjoys going to school by metro. We only go 2 days a week, Monday and Wednesday. And so from Monday to Wednesday, we live in a state of anticipation, excited about seeing friends and visiting the metro school.
That was Anna, Dmitry's mother, who also happens to teach at the so-called metro school. I asked Anna Zaikina from Kharkiv City Council to tell us what this is exactly.
To
our left is a platform, a real metro platform. And to our right, we can see the classrooms. And it was very challenging. I want to emphasize that this was a personal idea of our mayor. But I can't hide the fact that at the beginning, when this work was just starting, a lot of people thought that it was not very realistic, to put it mildly, and that it would never be implemented. But at the beginning, last September, we had 60 classes and 900 pupils. And by January, we had 2,200 pupils and 127 classes.
So in Kharkiv today, how many children, primary and secondary, require access to education?
Kharkiv has more than 100,000 school children. It should be noted that the number of school children in Kharkiv has hardly changed over the almost 3 years of large-scale invasion. Children in other parts of Ukraine and abroad want and are striving to remain pupils in Kharkiv schools and to study with Kharkiv teachers. We believe that this is extraordinary, a true recognition of the level of education in Kharkiv schools.
To better understand why Kharkiv is now undergoing this brutal ordeal, I meet with Professor Yaroslav Krytsak, a well-respected historian at the Catholic University of Lviv. He explained that Kharkiv is an essential part of Vladimir Putin's plan for the armed reconstruction of Novorossiya, referring so to the 18th century colony of Russian settlers who sought to benefit from better access to the booming West. Kharkiv is therefore a city straddling two worlds, as historian Yaroslav Krytsak explained.
So this is the symbol of Ukrainian resistance. And there was a doubt before the war that whether Ukraine, or which side Kharkiv would be, so to say, because Kharkiv was exactly on the Russian-Ukrainian border. And it had a very intensive and extensive ties toward Russia, mostly economical interest, military interest kind of things. Within the Soviet Union, it was probably one of the largest metropolis in the Soviet Union, so it both belongs to Ukraine and not. So there was a kind, and also before the war, it was the center of the opposition, which was relatively pro-Russian. So this was concern. Nowadays, everything has been changed. The city is staunchly Ukrainian, and on a variety of reasons, but also very importantly that I know, for sure many people left, especially business, they left to Western Ukraine, but what I know, this kind of resistance, that many people shifted to Ukrainian. They choose Ukrainian identity stronghold. But historically terms, it's one of the Ukrainian capital.
Colonel Vitaly Serantsev is the liaison officer in charge of OTU Kharkiv, the provisional military structure responsible for defending the 350-kilometer section of the northern borders between the towns of Sumy and Kupiansk. Unfolding a map, he shows me this northern front line and explains that each 20 square kilometer sector has his own Ukrainian defense brigade. Colonel Serantsev, this specific situation is due to the fact that the city sits around 40 kilometers from the international border and therefore from the front line. Is this correct?
Значить, дивіться, від окружної до Липців 17 кілометрів, іде ще 5 туди, 2.
Less than 40 kilometers. Look, from the border of Kharkiv's urban district, it's 17 kilometers to the town of Lipsy. And then from there, it's about another 5 kilometers to the exclusion area. So we can say that roughly, we are 25 kilometers from the front line with Russia.
Просування то їх, то нас, от різні.
How do you feel about the recruitance of Western allies to share the long-range weapons in their arsenals?
Звичайно, це, як сказати, як мінімум, що мені це дуже не подобається.
The least that can be said is that I am not happy about this, because today, for the peace of Europe, for the serenity of the West, we are paying with our blood and that of our children. Me and my family directly experienced the effects of the invasion from the first hours of this invasion, back in 2022. My home was right where the front line with Russia is now. Now everything is destroyed. The entire settlement was completely destroyed. Russia made it a test base. You may have seen videos of them bombing the school, the hospital. That's all where my family lived. And we can't do anything in return. We have nothing to get these territories back. And so, when it comes to not allowing the use of certain weapons, or not providing them, our hands are simply tied. We are not asking you to fight for us, but we are asking you to help us do it, to support us in this war of aggression, and then we will do the rest.
Просимо допомогти нам. Ми самі все зробимо.
What is the main danger faced by those who have the inevitable task of defending a city from 50,000 men determined to attack it?
Тут слід зазначити, що у нас немає паритетності.
We must always keep in mind that our strengths are not equal either in weapons or in personnel. They never have been and are not today. That is, the enemy has a superior number of military personnel and a superior number of weapons of all kinds, from conventional light weapons to missiles. What we need are long-range weapons, which we don't have in practice, and which prevent us from defending ourselves and stopping the attacks that we suffer on a daily basis. Every week in this sector alone, the enemy launches 900 missiles at us, and we can perhaps only respond with one of our own. Like the Neptune editor's note, a Ukrainian anti-ship cruise missile last week.
Next, I meet with Mariana Bukayevska, a pediatrician and psychologist who works for the Kharkiv branch of Voices of Children, a charitable foundation that offers free psychological aid to children and families affected by the war. With 15 centers and an online helpline, the more than 100 psychologists and psychotherapists have helped more than 100,000 children, teenagers and parents since the onset of the large-scale invasion.
Our center works with children mostly. It's maybe children with some extra stress, distress, which don't allow them to sleep normally, to eat normally. We have a lot of teenagers with great problem with their condition because teenagers say it's stress already.
As a professional doctor and psychologist, what scares you most about the current situation?
When I look at children, I'm scared that they forgot how to communicate with each other. For my opinion, it's maybe the main problem of next few years to improve, to repair this part of normal life, because we are social. Human is social unit. We can't live alone at all.
And why exactly does the war lead to so much loneliness?
It destroyed believeness to people. It's destroyed, and it's
Trust.
Trust, yeah. And it's very big job to rebuild this trust, yeah. Because we look at this glass, broken glass for any people, any another people. So it's difficult to trust when it was broken once.
Извини. Братик, разговаривай, пожалуйста. Пойдем, там тяжелый Где? Даю. Я ее чувствую. Братик, не смотри туда, пожалуйста.
Берите бандаж, открывайте, пацаны. Открывайте
Открой.
бандаж. Сколько времени назад турникет? 15. Написали? Давай.
У тебя только рука, Миш? Да. Миш, пожалуйста, если будешь отъезжать или как-то себя будешь хуже чувствовать, говори.
It goes without saying that the media provide a means of maintaining communication in this community of people who want to continue living in Kharkiv and of helping them fight loneliness and despair. There is, of course, the web via mobile phones, but there are also television and radio networks which, between blackouts, broadcast the news arriving both from the nearby front and from elsewhere in the country.
Радіо накипіло. Інформуємо та надихаємо.
Radio Nakipilo is a media group and radio station that was founded just 10 years ago but is already a benchmark in the city media landscape. I got to meet Yevgen Streltsov. He's the producer in charge for news and program. He's also the producer of a program entitled Memory of War.
У нас зараз запустилася програма, яка називається «Меморіалізація війни».
We have recently launched a program called Memory of War, in which she, production editor Natalia, and her guests discuss how to honor the memory of our fallen soldiers and aim to build a culture of remembrance in the Ukrainian society in general, how to go about it. And we realized that the topic resonates incredibly well with our listeners. We're seeing a lot of comments on social media too, because in addition to producing the program, we ensure its distribution via Instagram, Facebook, everything. And then we also have, for example, public talks, a space where we go to debunk the fake news of Russian propaganda. My colleagues analyze the fakes that they launch in the Kharkiv region, and we have many reactions here too.
But never-ending discussion about a war that offers no respite can saturate even the most resolute minds. In short, do the Kharkivians really need to hear so much about the war? Yevgen Streltsov's colleague Natalka Marinchak adds that, as radio professionals, they all play a more vital role than some might imagine.
Дивує те, що я встану зранку, виїду з хати і доїду до роботи.
Every day we have to deal with very different situations and moods. There are moments of calm, and then the bombings arrive suddenly. It is normal, therefore, that the mood in the city can change suddenly, and I would even say profoundly. There are moments of great fear that alternate with phases of euphoria, like those we experienced at the beginning of the war, when the counter-offensive made us think that it would be possible to win the war. And certainly, the situation we have experienced in recent months has brought us all together in a very strong way. In these circumstances, I believe that our main task as radio hosts is to bring a modicum of serenity to our listeners. Even in the darkest moments, I still try to give confidence and hope, saying that despite all the difficulties, we are moving forward. We are here with our listeners. In the meantime, we keep busy. We write a book. We record a record. We owe it to those who listen to us and trust us.
I leave Radio Nakipilo thinking that is exactly in this kind of situation that you remind why this work is so much important. Well, that's all for me. I want just to thank everyone who was kind enough to talk with me during my enlightening week in Kharkiv, not to mention Oksana Bibliv, for being with me in the job and acting as a very precious interpreter.